drilled out the holes for locating the power supply. Right here, we went with that location. Here we have the rectifier strip, right? We've got our filter caps. Nothing's being interfered with. We have our fuse and our fuse holder. That's not going to bother anything there. We installed, or just temporarily put in our output jack and input jack. And we're going to now look at some other places that we're going to need to install a few other things. So one would be some tag strips. Specifically, we need a tag strip to put in some balance resistors for creating an artificial center tap for the heaters, as the transformer, the Fender transformer, does not have a center tap, so we're going to be using two 100 ohm resistors there. And so basically we could get away with just cutting one of these guys down here, one of these strips down, to reduce the footprint, right? And the phenolic is great that it cuts this easy, right? So, okay. Here we have now a 3 strip, and I think a good spot for that may be, right here. That'll allow us to bring our heater lines over here and then straight out to the tubes themselves, to the sockets. So we can go ahead and mark that location with our Sharpie. Okay. The next thing we're going to want to do is have our primary ground. That will be for the chassis ground, the main chassis ground, from the power inlet, as well as from the first stage of the filter capacitors. I like to break up the grounding to keep dirty grounds away from signal grounds that are, let's say, we want to be cleaner, to avoid hum. So I usually just ground on two opposite sides of the chassis, have a ground that will leave to the wall, and then a preamp ground up here, and that creates a little bit of a difference that allows for you to control the flow of all the trash through the amp, to keep those first signal stages, which are most critical for low noise levels, to have very clean grounds. So I think right here might be a good place to put it. You want to be aware that you're not going to interfere with, let's say, where the transformer is located. I think we're good there, so we'll just mark ourselves right there where we want to have another ground. Okay. And then the main tag strips we're going to have mounted where the tube sockets are, through those same mounting hardware. So we'll have, number 4 hardware holding the tube socket in, as well as these guys. Now here we're going to need to do a little bit of a trim as well, because we're not going to need all of it. So we're going to take off these 2 on the end here. Right? There we go. Would have helped if I would have done. No, I did it on the right side. Right there, I thought I cut on the wrong side of the mounting tab. That would have been funny. So we're going to have here as our sort of like flying lead build out area, as well as on the prototype for the sock monkey, we're going to mount a couple of tag strips soldered directly to the potentiometers to build out for our cathodes for V1, V2, or rather, excuse me, V1A, V1B, as well as the tone stack and related components there. And then looks like we will have pretty much everything we need. So I'm going to go ahead now and disassemble this, drill out our holes for our 2 tag strips, and or rather our tag strip and our grounding point, and then we're going to go into actually starting to wire this thing together as we build it out with the parts. So I think that's good for right now, and next, you see, we'll have all the parts mounted in here in a more permanent basis. Okay, so we did install some more parts here, and the methodology I like to go about is to make sure that you've got the the power supply working, and then start building into other areas and make sure step by step as you go you've got your different areas, whether it be, you know, your power supply, your heater lines, your cathodes, you know, your plate resistors, your B plus, your B minus, whatever it is. Do it in stages and kind of test as you go, and that way, you know, you're not going to run into some major problems that require going back many steps that often will include taking apart things. So right here is a good place to stop and start checking everything. We have our power inlet installed and wired to ground. We have our fuse holder installed with fuse in there, wired from our hot lead to our power transformer. We have our neutral from our power transformer wired. We have our rectifier, the high volts from the secondary on the power transformer wired into the rectifier strip right here. We have our rectifier strip connected to our first filter capacitor, and we have a bleeder resistor that you can kind of see down in there, a 220K bleeder, to, you know, let the voltage kind of bleed off when the amplifier is not being used. It's a convenient sort of thing to have. We also have our heater lines running to our tag strip here with our 200 ohm resistors, creating our balance. So right now is a good time, like I was saying, to test your equipment and see that, you know, everything's functioning the way it should. And then you can proceed from there installing more parts. So I'm going to grab my meter. I'm going to put our chassis here, get our meter going. We're going to put our probes in, our positive probe on the terminal here, our negative probe on the terminal here. Okay. We have a power cord ready to go here, and we can just go ahead and plug this thing in now and see what we get on our meter. Alright, so we're at 357 volts DC on that first filter capacitor. It's holding steady. Looks like that's all good. Now we can just test our heater line as well. This should be fine, I'm sure. Going to AC, coming to our two legs of the heater line, and we've got 7 volts. So that's a little bit high, but as it will drop a little bit when we've got a load on it. So it looks like we're in a good spot here. So I'm going to go ahead and unplug this from the wall. I'll reconnect my probes to make sure that I'm bleeding off my voltage to a safe level before I go in there and start handling things again. And I got to tell you, when you're working around guitar amplifiers or other amplifiers that have high voltage like these do, you really shouldn't be doing it unless you're confident that you can work safely around high voltages. I don't want to show you how to do something and then have you go and get electrocuted. So if you're not familiar with doing this and haven't done it before, I strongly suggest not doing it and maybe getting some advice from a tech that's experienced and working with that tech to bring you up to speed. Alright, so we're down now to about 4 volts, so I can safely work on this amplifier again. I'm going to unplug our power cord from the mains here, from the wall. And now I'm going to start installing the rest of the power filtering supply, and then we could go ahead and test that.